Okay, so why do children need a healthy diet? Now, if you go to see a paediatrician, they'll go, well, they need a healthy weight and growth. That's the first thing they do. They weigh them, they check their height, put it in the red book, and you go, yeah, okay, they're doing very well. And say, well, they may be healthy height-wise and weight-wise, but what about that always got colds? What if they're really behind in their development? What if they're highly anxious and stressed? And these are the things that are not necessarily taken on board. Obviously, occasionally blood tests are done, but a lot of this is like, oh, we'll pass, or, you know, it's part of their behaviour. And actually, there's so much when it comes to food and how food can influence behaviour. And the research is just been booming. So often, when I'm writing a blog, I'm looking up on PubMed to see what the new evidence is, and there's just like 2023 explosion, of huge amounts of research in terms of, food during pregnancy and developmental outcomes, so many different factors to take on board. So basically, why do children need a healthy diet? Well, first of all, there's quite a lot of evidence that IQ can be influenced by the diet. Now, obviously, there are socio-economic factors as well, and genetics and so forth. But a study done at Bristol University took 7,000 children, and they studied them, and they found that those that had had a healthy diet with lots of fruit and veg and lots of home-cooked food before the age of 3 had a marginally higher IQ by the age of 8, whereas those that had had a lot of ultra-processed foods, so these are foods that are convenience foods straight out of a packet, these were the ones that had the lower IQ. So it does play a role. Learning and focus. I think I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail later, but I think we'll all know that we can associate that if we eat the wrong breakfast, we feel pretty zoned out and have brain fog, and so do our children too. And we work a lot with kids with ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism. I have actually written another book which is coming out at the end of August called Brain Brilliance, and that is another cookbook, and it's specifically for those nourishing those kinds of brains. But also behaviour. How many kids have those hangry moments? We just mood swings, meltdowns. They become very normalised. But actually, there are things that you can do food-wise. But I'm going to teach you about blood sugar balancing and how important that is for a child's behaviour. And then there's long-term mental health. So there was a study done in Australia which came out last year, and they looked at a massive cohort of mainly teenagers, and those teenagers that ate a lot more junk food, convenience food, ultra-processed food, and not enough fruits and vegetables and good quality proteins and things, went up to 15 years later, developed depression, anxiety, and so forth. And another study done at Bristol University, and this is really interesting because I was thinking, okay, my kids are very small, but it was a study done on 9-year-old kids, and there were 4,500 perfectly happy, healthy, and well kids. And they all had a blood test checking for something called inflammation. Now, inflammation is something that you may have heard about, especially during COVID, the cytokine storm from a virus. But inflammation can be triggered from ultra-processed foods, dehydration, lack of sleep, stress, etc. And those that had a very high level of inflammation in the blood, even though on the outside they seemed happy, healthy and well, by the time they got to 18, they were the ones that had the top third, so the top tertile in terms of that those inflammation markers, were the ones that went on to have depression, psychosis, self-harm, eating disorders, suicidal ideation, etc. So we work a lot with kids with mental health, and we just want to prevent that. And if we can do a lot when they're little, and get those foundations, get those healthy habits in, so they enjoy good food. It's not a battle all the time. And I know it might seem a battle right now. We see kids who eat 2 foods only, and eventually we get them there. And some kids will only eat cucumber. But there are amazing ways to get other fruits and vegetables in. You just have to be clever. And that's partly what the recipes are there for, and my blog and so forth, because I know how hard it is. So 2 weeks ago, I send out a newsletter every Sunday, and there's a click-through to that as well. And it was a black bean and beetroot muffin. It's gone I mean, in my little world, well, you know, it hasn't really, but I've had so many people sending photos of these muffins because the kids could not believe it. You know, they just didn't know, and they were literally black beans, beetroot, bit of maple syrup, and a couple of eggs. I mean, it was just amazing, and I was like, wow, you know. So there are things that you can do that. I'm not there to dupe your kids. It's very important to put the broccoli in, the peas as well. But you know, a piece of limp broccoli is pretty yuck, isn't it? You know. So let's make broccoli a bit more exciting. Let's put, you know, a little bit of lemon zest or a little bit of salt or garlic or whatever on the veggies. It makes such a difference, you know, to the foods. But anyway, that everyone's got their story, and I'm going to be doing a big Q&A. So I'm hoping we've got some lovely questions, but there will be more, I'm sure, that will come up. And then the immune response, as I said, you know, COVID's taught us so much about the immune system, hasn't it? How come 5 people within one family experienced COVID in such a completely different way? You know, fighting infections. I mean, you know, that's everyone's battle, isn't it, at nursery stage? I mean, absolutely. It's just chaos. Preventing allergies. Now, obviously, you know, sometimes kids do have anaphylaxis, but there are also lots of low-grade kind of reactions that you can help with a lot. So obviously, you know, there are medical interventions now which are helping with peanut allergy and egg allergy, but you know, there are things that you can do to reduce that overall sneezing and itching, asthma-y, wheeze and so forth. And then autoimmunity. We're seeing so many kids, you know, now with things like arthritis, diabetes, you know, and so forth. And again, you know, this is type 1 diabetes, which is autoimmune, celiac disease and so forth. And again, often these come from the gut, and the gut, as you'll learn later, is all nourished by food. And this gut microbiome is so important for our overall health. So yeah, I was just talking about the gut just now. And so we all think about the gut, we think about pooping, don't we? We think about sore tummies. And yeah, loads of kids are constipated. Loads of kids have, you know, pretty smelly, icky poos or whiffy farts or sore tummies, but there's or reflux. But there's a lot more than that. You know, the gut microbiome is, if you've heard of it before, most people have. I think, you know, everyone that follows someone like Professor Spector, you know, he's just launched this yogurt, this kefir yogurt thing, you know, in M&S. You know, I think most people have heard of live bacteria now. But it's so important, and it's so important for your child's immune system. It's so important to bolster that that microbiome for bringing down that inflammation I was talking about. Some of those bugs actually help to make vitamins, so if their diet's not that great, you know, the bugs will help to make some B vitamins. But what's really important to me, the bit that I think is so key in terms of the gut microbiome, is that it makes our neurotransmitters. So our building blocks for our brain, so our brain chemicals. So 95% of serotonin is made in the gut.
That's so interesting.
And serotonin obviously helps us sleep, helps us stay in a good mood, and it also helps us poop. Okay. And there is a big nerve called the vagus nerve, which connects the back of your brain to your gut. It's this big wandering nerve, and it's like a super highway. And those signals, the signals that go up and down all day, every day, about 90% of those signals go from the gut to the brain, and only 10% from the brain to the gut. So what's going on in the gut really matters. And just a quick one on is in terms of these neurotransmitters, the 2 key gut bugs that we all know about are usually lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. And these are 2 ones that are probably in yogurt, probably in kefir, probably in cultured foods, miso, apple cider vinegar, these sorts of things. And they help to make something called GABA. And GABA is our neurotransmitter in our brain that keeps us cool, calm and relaxed. It's that feeling, having been at a yoga class. Now we all want a bit more in our children, don't we?
Yeah.
It helps them sleep, it stops them being anxious. So, and GABA-rich foods are things like chamomile tea and oats and yogurt, but very high glutamate foods like ultra-processed crisps and, you know, highly flavoured foods and things like that are very stimulating to the brain. So this is where, you know, the gut can play a role at making more GABA. It also, lactobacillus, which is the one mainly in yogurt and so forth, This helps to make a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine helps with working memory, learning, self-regulation, emotional regulation, executive function. So all these really important things that we all want our kids to be able to develop. And very often when a child's been on antibiotics or has been on a dairy-free diet for whatever reason, I had one child who had to be dairy-free for a while, that means that lactobacillus doesn't necessarily grow as abundant, and so then later on down the line you can see dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, etc. So these things are all really important to feed that gut if possible.